Today's episode of Free Speech, the Natural United podcast, is one that I didn't originally plan when I wrote out all of the episodes for season 2, but something that I think is very necessary for us to discuss given how much it affects everybody on Earth and how massive and insanely extensive of an environmental issue this is. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the Australian bushfires. And now, I'm sure that you have heard a little bit throughout the news, but basically, since the end of July, there has been a massive fire across the island of Australia. So, for those of you that were unaware, this is kind of actually something that has happened there for a very long time. Their environment is conducive to it. It is a natural process that exists there. But that being said, it's very deadly. It's very dangerous. 800 deaths have been caused by these wildfires since the beginning of the record in 1851. And so, usually what causes the bush to set fire is droughts, and heat waves, and all sorts of other micro-environmental issues that exist there. Now, like I said, this is something that naturally happens there. But beyond that, there is a reason why they have become so extensive as of late. Though it is something that naturally happens there, the fires are not usually as large as they have been these last 150 years. And here's why. They became much more rampant first after the Aboriginal people who lived there before European settlers would kind of intentionally burn stuff. Controlled burns were very common for them to be able to reset the environment, to be able to get potatoes planted. This was their method for doing it. And then the Europeans introduced logging and farming industrially in the 19th century. And since then, the entire environment is basically being replaced with massive areas of land that are grass, and grass catches on fire very, very easily. It spreads very quickly. And so, although these bushfires are a natural aspect of living in Australia, the extent of the fire has been caused by human action. And so, the fire not only kills animals directly, but it also destroys their habitats, leaving them incredibly vulnerable after the fires. So, that being said, the idea that these fires are so much larger than they would be had humans not affected the environment shows that animals are at even more risk, because not only do they risk dying directly from being burned in the fire, but then on top of that, more habitats are burned than what would have happened had humans never been there. And so the most recent fires, they've killed almost 1 billion mammals, birds, and reptiles, and that doesn't even include other types of animals. It's the number that I've seen circulated as of the last week has been 800 million animals. And you can imagine the impact that that would have on any ecosystem, especially one that is reliant on all species that are just on this island. It's not like there's other land masses that they have to go to. It's very, very succinctly animals who survive on this one continent. And then, beyond that, there's also human deaths of the people that live there. You have the potential to lose your home, lose electricity, lose the ability to call people with your phone. And, beyond that, there are even certain places where people don't have access to water. And, the debris from this fire is very, very bad for people to breathe in. The people of Australia are forced to live in an environment that's clearly very bad for them. There's risks of heart attack, there's risks of stroke, there's risks of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, which are increased because of the toxins that are put in the air through these excessive wildfires that are in part as substantial as they are as a result of human action. And then maybe you even look at the financial aspect of what something this extensive has the potential to do. Billions and billions of dollars of damage is going to be caused. You talk about the effect that this might have on farming. You talk about the effect that this might have on tourism. And this really does have the opportunity to negatively affect the lives of Australian people for a very long time. And New South Wales, the government there has pledged $1 billion to repair infrastructure. And, the ironic aspect of that is $1 billion simply won't be enough to replace all of the infrastructure that will be displaced as a result of this natural disaster. And so it's going to take 100 years for all of the carbon that's being emitted to be reabsorbed as a result of these fires. So this is not something that just happened in 2019 and the beginning of 2020. This is something that will persist for all of our lifetimes. And so that's why I think it's very, very important that I make this video to at least raise some awareness about the specifics of what's going on there. So as I discussed earlier, the Aboriginal people, they've used these bushfires for thousands of years, but they weren't doing it nearly, they weren't creating the environment nearly as unsustainable as when the Europeans arrived. Even James Cook, as he arrives upon Australia, says that Australia is the continent of smoke because of these controlled burns. But then what happens is the Europeans cut down trees, leaving all shrubs and grasslands, which, as mentioned before, are more likely to burn. So what they planted was called gamba grass. It's Gamba grass, and it basically fuels the fire. So, everyone has heard of the massive fires ravaging through California, and those have been incredibly, incredibly damaging. Those fires, they reached 247,000 acres of California. 247,000 is a lot of acres, right? Well, the acreage that we see in Australia, and now you have to know the majority of the Australian population lives close to the oceans, but beyond that, the land mass that is affected by these bushfires in Australia is 73 times the acreage in California. So 247,000 acres, very, very destructive. But imagine 73 times that, and that's what we're dealing with right now. And so the late 19th century fires were extensive because the infrastructure was not there to put out the fires. When this was first happening, I mentioned that there have been 800 deaths in the last 150 years. At the beginning of that time period, we didn't have helicopters flying different phosphate chemicals and throwing them down onto the fires, which have helped us limit the amount that the fire spreads. So yes, we do have technology to help us combat types of disasters like this, but beyond that, the air quality in Sydney is still 11 times the hazardous level. So we have people living in conditions that we, as other humans on Earth, should really be uncomfortable with. And that's why I made this video. I'm hoping that hopefully this video might serve not only as an informational opportunity for you to discover a bit more about what's going on in Australia, but also to potentially provide those people with some help. And now, I know that financial resources, in the wake of something this bad, where we have a bunch of people dying, nearly 1 billion animals dying, and entire homes being ripped off the face of the earth, I know that, the efforts to revert that, or at least provide aid to those people or the bushfires themselves, it can only go so far. It's already happened. But there are 4 really awesome organizations that I'd like to suggest you guys even just look into whether or not you donate. I think they're doing really amazing work. Those 4 are 1, the Australian Red Cross, 2, Salvation Army Australia, 3, the NSW Rural Fire Service, and then 4, St. Vincent's de Paul Society Australia. All 4 of these have been working around the clock to try and make the lives of people in Australia just that much easier during what will easily be remembered as a tragedy. There were bad fires 10 years ago, but these have been so extensive, they caused so much damage that Australia is really in need of some help right now. And by helping just, the people and the ecosystems there, what we will be able to do is safeguard all of the endangered species who are not doing incredibly well with these fires, as I'm sure you can imagine. You see pictures and videos of helicopters throwing produce off the side of a helicopter. Clearly, a lot has to be done in order to restore the world that once existed there, and in part, humans are to blame. The settlers, who are European, definitely overlooked the natural ability of fire to spread in cutting down trees. And so those are the 4 organizations that I recommend that you look towards. But beyond that, there are many, many groups who are getting a lot of resources together to help these people. So all I would say is that this is one of the largest environmental issues of the last 10 years. And beyond that, if you live in America, let's say, when the Yellowstone volcano goes off, we are going to look to other people to help us with our environmental issues. This is very much the same there, even though it's more frequent. Even a few dollars can help, especially when you cascade that with a bunch of other people who are trying to help. But Australia is in a very, very vulnerable place, economically, and beyond that, environmentally. And right now they need a lot of the global attention, because what is going on there is more severe than any other environmental issue going on right now. But beyond that, thanks for sitting with me and learning kind of my perspective and the empirical evidence behind what's been going on there. But as always, if you have any idea what you want to see in future episodes, feel free to comment them below. I'm more than willing to kind of discuss anything related to the world and the environment. But to the people of Australia, I feel for you. I did everything that I possibly could financially to try and help the situation, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Thank you.